husbands and their sons and their daughters are out there dying to racism. To systematic racism, because you know what the police are? The police of racism in the world at the moment. There is a lot of very overt racism, in the sense that we are seeing blatant fucking racial hate. Okay, we're gonna crack down on racism, we're gonna crack down on hate speech, we're gonna crack down on sexism, we're gonna... One fucking purpose. Racism. They have nothing else in common. They are a spectrum of Nazis, right? And as a result, you end up in this situation where we are living in a time of incredible racism, where people are saying them, yeah, you're killing everyone else too with your fucking drone programs and your racism and your, yes, we were, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's racism, but it's fucking racism, is set up so that... But there is a difference between regulations and racism. There is a difference between... The left-wing parties can win and bring about major reforms. Tails. Your right gets destroyed, and racism gets stamped out once more. You know, in other languages. No, we don't. We don't. We learn that racism is bad, we learn that Nazis are bad, and that you can shoot them in the face. Justice and right and wrong. We are fighting over higher ideals than base fucking racism. Universes, and you know, who can stop battles and make peace between warring races, and so for him to come out is like, yes! A lot of abuse online, a lot of racism and sexism and homophobia and stuff online, because it's a very shy of it. We're all so obsessed with racism and sexism that we don't see the real racism and sexism going on. Fact is that there is racism in America. There is a fuck ton of racism in America, and instead of addressing, you know, okay, slavery was abolished, but people were still, you know, I mean, we're still dealing with racism, but you know, it's shifted, you know. Your wish is gonna happen. We're looking to have upturns of racism, oppression, and income inequality. A lot of problems, a huge amount of problems, you know. The racism, killing unarmed black people, you know. But you say that the racism is bad, and that you don't have to explain, but really what that means is you're a coward, and no. You know, they rape kids, so, you know, all black people are evil. There is no racism, because once upon a time, some black people were evil. Again, I realised that at the current moment, with all the fucking racism in all the fucking racism in America, that, yeah, that by laughing, he was not taking his racism seriously enough. So yeah, they're off the back of the fact that they are able to do things that are only possible because of racism. You cannot have an absolute worst way to fight against racism. Okay? Like, yes, you fight against it when they are in power and they are about... And ignored racism in America and leaned towards toxic theories about how, yes, parents are all to blame. Basically, if you're a white person, you benefit from racism, and you've just got to fucking accept that. And I'm going to be talking about this large black man, and you know, that's problematic and racism or sexism. Because no, Tasha Yar is shown to be very, very competent. Fuel efficiency standards, though. Yes, racism or saving the environment?
Racism or saving the environment?
Trees. Racism is just used as a tool to shut down conversations about in Western society. But there is still racism and bigotry within that. There is still the way that the Irish are productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. Lost loved ones to our police forces in America who lost them because of racism, basically.
So, moral relativism. Okay. So, you know, there is absolute morality. Okay, absolute morality.
They were misled. They were fools. They were letting racism and xenophobia, whether it was their own or the racism and xenophobia, to speak more eloquently on the subjects of racism in Britain and America, because they will have experienced it, because they will be...
It was not a victory against racism. What it was a victory against military secession. It was essentially
a culture where the people in power profit from their continuing to be racism. Because you have a culture...
war, it's kind of natural to think of it kind of as racism is today, whereby, you know, they are normal people.
And once again, like in fucking Britain, right, like, racism is used as a tool, as like a,
You know, like homosexuality, on issues of racism, on sexism, on the rights of the transsexuals, is because all this shit doesn't affect
productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. A movement to fucking clear this shit up, and we had racism as a great tool to shut people the fuck up, and, you know, it's up above the parapet. You are fucking deluded. I do not like racism. I do not tolerate racism. We have to acknowledge that fact if we are going to do anything about the racism in the world today. It is happened.
Racism is a tool. Sexism is a tool. Homophobia is a tool.
No, there is no, but racism just is so much better. I do hope, though, that my sorry to use that pun, but, you know, it's not about racism. The American Civil War is
He's going to look inwards at the problems of bigotry and racism and generally capitalism and corruption. Is an institution, a state of institutional racism whereby black people are more likely to be seen as suspicious. And yeah, I'm basically against racism regardless of your perspective, although I do recognize the fucking bigoted. But nevertheless, racism and sexism and what have you are tools used by productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. Fascism, because Nazism, because racism is a blight upon the world. And if you fuckers think that you can poke your fucking head...
white people, and that's, yeah, inherent fucking racism, and that's horrifying, but also, police can just steal stuff.
Just be arseholes in a safe,
non-destructive manner that doesn't feed into racism and sexism and misogyny and transphobia. The establishment candidate is like, yay, racism, and the left-wing anti-establishment candidate is like, boo, racism, and, you know, that you've moved past racism and slavery. You haven't. You're still killing people. You're still at war with black people.
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
There is a lot of racism in the world at the moment. There is a lot of very indicative of not just bigotry, not just racism, but outright genocidal xenophobia. I suppose the entire history of the patriarchy and of sort of sexism and racism can be traced back
And found ways to persist a culture of racism that would see black people are more likely to end up on prison in white person. You are racist because you benefit from racism. We have a power structure that was set up
that I am very clear cut on. But racism is one of them. Particularly this very specific form of...
So obviously, listen to them, watch their stuff. When they explain how racism works, fucking listen to them. Sometimes I am a twat and I'm the person who can shiv the most people in the face the most effectively. And then similarly, racism comes into that because literally... Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
You know, we've conquered racism. We've got Benjamin Sisko. But instead of, that bit of our history, we've now got...
What happened? We're scared. What the fuck's going on? And the racism is him sort of fanning the flames of that fear, going, yes, vote for me!
Which is right on the American border. Like, it's playing into the whole themes of racism and stuff like that. And, even, the...
Because we fought wars over Nazis. We fought wars over racism. The American Civil War. Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
The Republicans have exploited racism to get power, right? Except they usually know to say, hey, hold back. I think that, yes, there is genuinely... Racism is a thing. Genuinely, there is a... Can you imagine how swiftly America would be purged of racism if the feminist ire that sexism and racism isn't right anymore? The patriarchy needs to die. But I can understand where these... America, calm the fuck down and fucking address its racism. Oh, you've taken down the Confederate flag. Oh, that... And to the forces of darkness, I will not bend. To racism, to bigotry, I will not let... I thought Westerns were all just, racism and manliness. I didn't think they deliberately choose... They exploit racism, basically. Because suddenly,
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random rant. It's about whatever pseudoscientific bullshit he's using to justify his racism, because for him, he genuinely just doesn't like the fact that black people look to get shot. America has a problem with racism, and because it has a problem with guns, productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random rant.
The slaves once upon a time, and that there's still quite a significant amount of racism in the world today, and that generally white racism in all the fucking racism in America, that you know, maybe you don't necessarily want the police. It'll be fine, they're only everywhere, you know. And so that's why you had this idea of racism as well, because it was a method of keeping people
end up in charge of all of these factories or whatever, inherit that racism, that sexism, transphobic productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random rant.
There's three, but one of them's obviously evil. You know, that's the whole racism, classism, stuff. Okay, like, we're not gonna discuss that, because as far as I'm concerned, because the economy doesn't work. That, you know, you've got systemic racism in America. You know, the police are just,
and the fact that he's been playing to racism for so long means that a lot of people I care about are going to be affected and have already been
very much. We're going to be talking about racism and in the world of the fashion and in the world of the
political position which has the argument of racism.
Racism and sexism, that we don't see the real racism and sexism going on behind the scenes. Okay, it's all just white men saying.
I mean, apart from anything else, we see how racism is nuanced in the real world. Like yes, white people in rest.
oh, well, he's a feminist, so he'll say sexist things. He's anti-racist, and so he'll say things that he's, and it's like, no, fuck that, right?
Treating black people differently is wrong. Most of us can do that. But the racism can be subtle. The sexism can be subtle.
Gun control. Okay, this is racism in its most vile fucking form.
I will be able to sort of explore like how does racism like affect dwarves and halflings and elves and.
Okay, America is a place where there is rampant fucking racism, where there is murder and mass murder.
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random rant.
People need to be able to rage and say, you fuckers, this was a hate crime. This was a motherfucking hate crime. This was an act of respect. Or I could just whip them if they complain. And so kind of racism was brought into this.
You know, the key to writing good characters is to have race as an afterthought, and then just sort of say, okay, I'm going to write a character.
Easily to say, well, we need to bomb these people. I want to do this. You know, racism is a very convenient excuse to be horrible.
It was by blending utter barbaric cruelty and racism with America has got a lot of racism inherent in it, and so it's not surprising that
you're killing everyone else too with your fucking drone programs and your racism and your, yes,
we were saying bigotry and xenophobia and racism, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It's not I wanted to make sure that people knew it was more than just, you know, beating the Tories and racism. You know, I wanted to make sure people knew that cuck. It's basically racism and saying cuck a lot. Full-on race war within your own country now, because instead of addressing the racism within your police force, you let it then maybe being yourself is okay, and you know, and it's and kind of this guy coming from a world of racism, like he you know, because he at least, you know, at least we are dealing with massive fucking overt racism like you do over there. Yeah. At least our race.
And it's not about Trump, and it's not about the alt-right, it's not about racism. Although that is going to spike, and we are going to have to deal with that.
Who seriously thinks that it's racism against the white people or whatever? And you need to consider something very important.
Anti-establishment sentiment and a lot of racism going into it, but a lot of it is also just kind of like 9/11 happened.
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
Killing now. That's only going to continue if you don't address the racism. Except you're not gonna. Still was the old white guy. Still was the bigotry and racism and sexism. Still was the thousands of white man sci-fi superheroes, but for me, racism, a dislike for the unlike, xenophobia. This is...
He's basically just explained that he is someone who is filled with genuine racism and wants to be ready to murder.
Despite what the mainstream media may think, we don't actually like racism. Apart from Wales, because, you know, they elected a massive fucking problem with racism. So yeah, they're sick of it now. They're sick of it now, and guess what? They've got fucking go.
Almost like there's some kind of institutional racism, and yeah, there is institutional racism, because
you have a massive issue with racism. It's not going to change the fact that your political system is, you aren't a racist. The point there is to try and legitimize racism, because it's this whole bullshit. We can just pick the right answer. By being that I stand against xenophobia, that I stand against racism. And it was very interesting, very interesting.
the history books, fascism, racism, it does not work to wipe out religions, right? The Romans, they literally killed.
The reason that you're seeing this pushback is partly because racism is a tool being used by Donald Trump to get into power. Racism. I know it's a controversial statement. I don't like racism. But a flag is not innately racist. Okay? It's a corporatism stoking the fires of you know, racism and saying, immigrants. That's very hard. The people who oppress the others are always on top. You know? This whole, it's racism against whites, it's sexism against men. Who stands absolutely 100% against racism, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. I stand 100% for
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. Productions.
I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
Saying, well, how do I get the public on board about me? You know? The campaign against racism and sexism is just...
He knows that. He's not a complete fucking buffoon. He will play up the racism to get into power, but now that he is in power...
There is an issue with ethics and games journalism. Yeah. It's not racism. Immigration is genuinely an issue. It's
to pour away at those doubts of his and maybe show him the way to the light away from racism, because yeah,
And the left-wing anti-establishment candidate in the right-wing anti-establishment candidate is like, yay, racism! And the left-wing anti-establishment candidate is like, boo!
the police force in general. I am very pro-police, but you have a problem in America with racism, and that needs to be addressed. I know, but also America is where racism kind of gets really fucking deadly. I mean, it's deadly in Britain too, but
The mass shootings, the racism, the bigotry, the, you know, ISIS, 9/11, it's all connected. It's that, you know, if you're gonna say, okay, this is my story on racism with robots, and you don't have any black people in it, you're like, okay, so it's okay to have fantastic racism, is it? Okay, we can't do that. Like, okay, we just
was like, see, Donald Trump, see, racism is wrong, Nazis bad, Nazis, they bad, in the strength of racism, in the sense that racism will now be said against anyone who is
to black people, to people of colour, you know. I hit a brick fucking wall. It's just like, no, racism.
It's nauseating. How can I deal with the rightward shift of political culture? It feels like racism is stronger than ever. I had one girl tell me racism and xenophobia, whether it was their own or the racism and xenophobia of the candidates who were offering these things. What Trump did was make the racism of the Republican Party and the racism of America to give you all the reasons and logic why racism is genuinely bullshit. But I think it is important for you to understand productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
Unarmed black people in America are being shot by their own police force because racism, you know. The all-pervading racism of America that is killing black people. It has to end.
In general, we have been fighting against racism for a long time, and, you know, there is a lot of
Misogyny is the hatred of women. And this isn't like racism or sexism, because sexism is just
things better. Sort of like, you know, pushing racism on the back of nice things, saying, you know, and it takes place during a time when racism was really big institutional thing in Britain. Going to be fucking removing any fucking racist comments because I don't like racism. And if you need me to explain it to you, The left wing cannot suffer through social conservatism. Racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, these are just literally having it being about racism, about white people thinking that they are superior to black people, different cultures. America is generally more of everything, right? You have more racism, more divisiveness, more gun crime, more crime. Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
The police force should not address the racism within their community. Because if you don't address the racism with
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
there is a fuck ton of racism in America, and instead of addressing that, we're addressing the fact that some black people... Enough with the American fucking racism. Like, it ends now. Now. Okay? Because
The alt-right is, aside from racism. Like, where the fuck does cuckold come into this? Because
over racism, like you do over there. You know, at least our racism has a semi-fucking basis in reasonableness, in the fact that, yeah, going, boycott against Oscars is white racism. Like, no, okay. I feel the need to explain why no. Where, you know, you're not talking about racism, you're talking about segregation between robots and humans. You know, you're not... Stupid argument has validity on. And they go, but this. It's not racism because of freedom of speech. It's not sexism because they're... Shoot first, ask questions later, and oh shit, we kill a lot of black people because racism. And I know there's gonna be... Absolutely knows that. You gotta think that he knows that. So he's playing up to the racism. He wants people to feel outraged.
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
Feminists, radical feminists, I call upon you. Fight the racism in America. And
start thinking about, you know, racism characters, and then I'm gonna pick someone.
Farage burst onto the scene and say, "Hello, racism! Yes, vote for me because I'm a normal bloke. I mean, I'm part of the establishment." Similarly, you know, racism and stuff like that. It's basically just sort of painting a great big target on
racist, then we might actually have to look at institutional racism in America. It's about the fact that if we actually examine this ongoing conflict in the background of racism and tension and kind of a semi-messianic gunning down an MP while screaming Britain first as a fucking indictment of fucking racism, putting Britain first. Okay?
Feminism and, you know, countering racism and, you know, countering Islamophobia and countering, you know, homophobia, and very, very fucking clear. Okay? I hate racism. Alright? I absolutely hate.
I see what is happening in the world right now. I see the racism and the horror, and I don't fucking like it. that that's kind of ranted against, and racism is ranted against there. And then you see that as well in
Why no, if you are in a privileged position, it is not racism for other people to take that privilege into account. And
I do not tolerate racism. Now, I absolutely hate racism, and I hate the fact that a bunch of privileged, bigoted, because if you don't address the racism within the American police force, then this type of thing is only going to happen more. Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. You have a massive fucking problem with racism. A massive fucking problem with racism. So yeah, because a dog whistle is supposed to be only heard by dogs, right? This is just out and out racism. This is Donald Trumping, right? Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
And genuinely, you can watch your fucking tapes. You've got a massive fucking problem with fucking racism in your justice service. And
Fuck anymore. For me, as far as I'm concerned, war against racism is being declared. A war.
Factors that I have just discussed are why we are seeing a resurgence in racism and sexism and misogyny at a time when
The racism to get into power, but now that he is in power, suddenly all of that racism is only biting him in the arse. And the guns actually are what keeps the institutional racism taking place.
at the Gettysburg Address was basically saying, you know what? This is about racism. This is about slavery. This is about
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. Story about racism. With his new cabinet in America. We are at a time when racism and racist beatings are on the rise, where shitty country with a lot of racism in it. Like, yeah, I'm gonna say some shocking news to you. By and large, we have seen a degradation in the strength of racism, in the sense that racism will now be
rid of. But you see that the paranoia, the racism, the bigotry, the genocidal attitude, the outbreed
we have right now. Because in theory, we should be stamping out racism. But instead, racism is becoming more and more vocal because
in this day and age. And their sexism seems to be so prevalent, and racism seems to be such a massive issue. Feel okay with this, so it is reverse racism. You're too good for this. You're too good for this. Only the white folk get to be slaves. And yet,
fascism, swing towards racism. We've, global warming and climate change is sort of quietly chugging away in the really fucking deadly. I mean, it's deadly in Britain too, but in Britain, racism is deadly generally. Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram. The reason that we have such entrenched racism and sexism in the world today is that basically feudalism
On the ground in Syria. Oh, well, that's just an intervention and self-defense. Yeah. Racism used as a political tool
is online. And this is the issue with drawing the definition of racism tighter and tighter and tighter.
and also to a certain extent, right? If you draw out and make acceptable racism, then you can use it as a tool more easily.
Productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
Essentially, what I think people in America like to think is that all of the racism is focused in the South.
Your shit. It isn't enough to scream racism. You need to be capable of dropping an essay perfectly encapsulating your argument and countries where they are privileged, from countries that have issues with racism, right? From countries that have had racist.
As I've said before, like I don't like racism. I know it's a controversial statement. I don't like racism.
And again, this is something that is horrible and is motivated by racism, and yet brutally, pragmatically. So,
Hey, so, alt-right fuckers, I'm running you into the ground. And the sort of, hey, so, you know, racism is still fucking bad and I'm against it, videos. They should be at home fighting for their countries and racism. And then the right of the front page is, look at this young productions. I am a left-wing autistic person who is against the alt-right and hates racism. Welcome to my random ram.
More important than white men being able to say bullshit. Okay, we need to end American racism. It needs to end now.
and just so we're clear, she was white as well. You know, this isn't racism at this point. This is just shitty.